Jason. Welcome to Midway Education's annual conference of 2020. We're happy to have you join us. So today, I'm representing the Midway Education Consulting to ask you a couple of questions. Given the epidemic, this is really special circumstances. So given this special circumstance, we hope to have you give us some advice and expertise or insights on the studying abroad, the U.S. admission industry.
Wonderful. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, great. So let's start with the first question. So will the admission criteria of the U.S. universities be affected by the epidemic?
So in terms of the evaluation and selection criteria, you're going to see very little change. Colleges are still looking for students that show great promise and show their ability to make an impact on campus and beyond. And the types of things that colleges use to distinguish that, academics, test scores, extracurriculars, all of that will still be the same. However, what is going to change is the relative importance of all of those factors. So things like a student's financial need and their ability to pay is going to be a little bit more important in the next few years. Students' demonstrated interest is also going to be a little bit more important. Just as we saw this past year with admissions, more schools going to the waitlist, we saw that when they were going to the waitlist, they were pulling off students that had no demonstrated family need or limited financial need, and also had a great wanting to come to that college, that they maybe followed up, that it was clear from their supplementary essays that they were really interested in that school. And so I think that those are the types of things that colleges are going to pay a little bit more attention to as they come out of those core academic pieces, those essays, and all the other parts that already make up the application.
I see. Thank you for your answer. So next question is, what is the impact, or how does or will the epidemic impact the prospective international students, also like working in the U.S. or the OPT policies?
Sure. So the things that are going to change kind of fall into two categories. There's first the things that are changing because of the U.S. federal government, and then there are things that are changing because of colleges. So things that are changing because of the government would be things like visas. International student impacts come down to whether international travel is permitted. If you can't fly anywhere, then you are not going to be able to come to the country. Now, we've already seen some policies about restricting nonstop flights between China and America. And so it looks like, as of now, things might be heading in that direction where it's a little bit harder to travel internationally. Secondarily, things that the federal government controls would be student visas. So the government could very well say that they're going to restrict how many student visas they're going to be, what percent of international students publicly funded colleges are able to have on campus. Schools don't control that. That's all things that the government is in control of. And depending on the relationship between America and China, that very well could have impacts into the college admission space. Schools, on the other hand, how the epidemic is going to change that, it's largely what I had mentioned prior. They're going to look towards international students that are full-pay students to fill gaps by domestic students that are maybe now a little bit more financially strained. In terms of kind of OPT and school work visas, we don't really see that there's going to be much of an impact to the visas in terms of what students are and are not permitted to do. It's just likely that there's going to be a change in the quantity of visas that are out there. And again, a lot of that kind of OPT, that has to do more with the federal government. And then lastly, given the kind of economic downturn, I would imagine that there are going to be fewer U.S. companies that are going to be willing to sponsor international students for employment, fewer international companies that are going to be able to provide different kind of green card programs and the like. And so you're going to see on the kind of out of college and the career services side a little bit harder of an opportunity ahead and a little bit of a more challenging road for students as they look to kind of stay in America at medium to small size companies.
Understand. Thank you for the insight. Okay, so the next question is, considering the possible extension of 2024 term and the limited faculty capacity of each university, so will it lead to the reduction of the acceptance rate in 2021?
So I believe that a lot has been said about a lot of students that have just graduated from high school and are looking to enroll, potentially taking gap years. Historically, the number of students taking gap years has been well under 1%. And even if that number were to double, triple, quadruple, it still would be a fairly insignificant change to the bigger picture of how many students are coming to enroll. And so I don't necessarily think that gap years by the current high school seniors are going to make such a dramatic impact for the admissions acceptance rates for the current high school juniors and then the current high school sophomores. I do think that some things that are going to make impacts for the juniors are some of the issues around the changing testing requirements. I imagine that just given that there's so much more uncertainty, you're going to see many more students apply to many more colleges because they think that they would be able to somehow like sneak in without showing their SAT scores and the like. They think that they might be able to get in because their essays are more compelling. At the end of the day, I think that you're going to see admissions statistics be largely the same as they have been for the past few years. It's just that this past admission cycle represented a really favorable opportunity to those high school seniors that are matriculating to college this fall. Just because this past year was a little bit slightly easier, a little bit greater opportunities for the current high school seniors, doesn't mean that next year is going to be worse. It's just that last year was better. Doesn't necessarily change what next year is going to be overall.
Understand. Thank you. So the mainland China has not yet opened the GRE and TOEFL exam. So if there's no test before the application deadline, do you think the U.S. universities have other policies for international or Chinese students?
So we're seeing a lot of schools change their test policies. A lot of schools are going test optional, they're going test flexible, whatever they call it, and those are largely marketing terms. They're loosening up their restrictions and how stringent they are with their testing policies. Now, I would argue that just because a school goes test optional doesn't mean that they are test unimportant. A school going test optional is great for domestic students with high test scores, but international students, especially from East Asia, they're still really expected to have high test scores. Nothing has really changed in that regard. Students should still continue to take the standardized tests. They should still continue to take the tests to earn admissions for the most highly selective schools, and they should still seek out opportunities to sit for these exams. Now, if there are just no opportunities to sit for the exams, I do imagine that schools are going to have to be a little bit more flexible, but there still are plenty of months to go by, and things like the TOEFL are not just given all at once, like the SAT and the ACT. When you drill down into the different policies that schools have set forward, a lot of them are about the subject tests that are given by the College Board. A lot of them are about the SAT and the ACT, because those exams are given one Saturday morning once a month. Things like the GMAT and the GRE, which have been given by computer whenever you want to go to a test center, and also have been able to make the jump to at-home online versions. I don't see that there's going to be any change in the policies. And similarly with the TOEFLs, I imagine that colleges are going to still want them. And many colleges that have changed their ACT or SAT policy have explicitly said that change does not necessarily apply for homeschooled students, so students in America that do not attend a traditional public or private high school, as well as international students.
I see. Thank you. So what is the impact of the test optional or test cancellation, you just mentioned, on Chinese students?
It really depends on what year you are in high school. For someone who is in 9th or 10th grade, the coronavirus is probably going to be gone with plenty of time for you to take the SAT or ACT, as well as subject tests, AP exams, the TOEFL. And so while this year, for the foreseeable future right now, there might not be opportunities to take these exams, that might just give you time to prepare for the exams a little bit more, and also might provide an opportunity to focus elsewhere on other parts of your application so that when the tests are resuming back to normal, you're able to sit and focus your attention there. For students that are in 11th grade right now, or kind of going into their senior year, really it does make sense to try as hard as you can to sit and take these exams. You know, if they open back up, to really be there first and foremost at the front of the line to try and register for the exams. Colleges still really want these exams. It really is important. It helps their rankings. Even something like the U.S. News World Report rankings, they administer a penalty for schools that admit more than 25% of students that have not submitted a test score. And the U.S. News World Report has not changed their ranking criteria as it regards to the coronavirus pandemic. And so you can rest assured that even though schools might be test optional, they still really care about the test scores. It's no coincidence that test scores go up by a point or two every single year. It's something that every college is trying to do. And this upcoming year is going to be no exception. And so if you can submit high test scores, you definitely should. If you have kind of medium test scores, okay, but not great, you really should try everything in your power to take the test again when it opens up, if you're able to have that opportunity and submit a test score moving forward that is going to be higher and really demonstrates that ability to score well on any test that's put in front of you.
Understand. Thank you. So let's look at from a bigger picture. So does the relationship between China and U.S. affect the admissions of U.S. universities?
So I think this is another issue of kind of the overall governments and the overall society versus how colleges are. You know, certainly it's going to be a situation where colleges still need international students on campus, both in terms of adding to campus diversity as well as to help pay for running a college. There are things that are just not going to change regardless of what is happening. I do think, however, on the federal side, if the tensions continue between China and America, then you are going to see a few more restrictions placed that makes it more difficult for international students, especially students from China, to come to America. And whether those are travel restrictions, whether those are international visa restrictions, I think that you could see something where the government overall makes a statement. You could even see something as simple as restricting the kinds of jobs and opportunities that students have while they're on campus. You might have certain restrictions on the type of research that they can get involved with, or the certain types of majors that they can pursue. But a lot of those policies are going to be set at the federal government level and not necessarily at a school-by-school level. Colleges still want international students, still really depend on Chinese students to both pay the bills, to have high test scores, and to really add to the campus experience.
I see. Thank you. So for the next question, I believe you have brought up that issue, but still, you know, students and parents are concerned about the difficulty of the employment in the U.S. So may you please elaborate a little bit on that?
Absolutely. So there's no doubt that we are entering an economic downturn. That's clear. Now, whether it's a depression, whether it's recession, whether it's a V-shaped recovery, all of these things, it's very unclear. But when you have in America unemployment that is at record levels, when you have companies on Wall Street that are reducing their forward guidance, when you have stagnation with wages, it's clear that there is going to be some economic hurt. And so that really does affect all parts of the economy. And a lot of companies are not necessarily as eager to hire anyone, international or domestic. If they can get someone new through the door, and when they're able to kind of redo their hiring, they're going to certainly look first for students that have upper levels of education from more highly selective schools. They're going to look for individuals that have a lot of work experience that can really help and bring on the job training. And so it is going to be kind of, when you're thinking about a buyer's market from the companies, or a seller's market from students, the power dynamic is definitely going to shift towards the companies and the buyers. And so companies are going to be able to go for a higher level educated students, maybe master's students, to fill roles that had traditionally been filled by undergraduate students, as well as students that have been in the working world for many years. And so for the next year or two, it probably will be a little bit more difficult for any student, international students especially, to get jobs in America. But 4 or 5 years from now, when there is a more stable economy, when there has been that economic recovery, things will be a little bit more back to normal. And so if you are just going to college this year, you're applying to college next fall, this is largely going to be a great time for you to be in college, because you're going to be at campus getting more training, more education, while the economy is able to resolve itself. And then once everything is more back to normal, you're going to be able to come out of college with that knowledge, that skill, that credential, and really add to a company.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. So for the next question, we want to know, for the students who are going to the U.S. For PhD studies, so has the scientific research funding decreased in the past 2 years, or how do you see that will change in the near future?
So definitely funding is tight right now because university endowments are down. A lot of universities are invested in the stock market, different annuities and bonds and all the like. And so as a lot of the value on Wall Street has come down, so too have the endowments. And also money is generally on a research level being rerouted towards coronavirus cases, causes, research, all the like. And so you're seeing a lot of foundations that do award money to colleges. A lot of the federal money that is given to colleges, public and private, is being dispersed in a way that is to address the global pandemic. It's key to remember that a PhD is more like a job than it is a traditional student. A PhD is paid a stipend, whereas a undergraduate student or a master's student is paying tuition. A PhD student is expected to teach or be a TA in a course while they're conducting their own research, while as an undergraduate or master's student is taking courses and is studying. And so you're going to see colleges that have that don't necessarily have endowed spots for PhD students to really not be able to have as many PhDs come through the door in the short term, just because they're just not in a position to be able to fund PhD students. And that employee relationship of a PhD is going to make it a little bit more difficult for PhD applicants in the next few years. Again, tuition paying undergraduate students, tuition paying graduate students, they're not going to be negatively affected by this.
I see. Thank you. So the last question is, let's go back to the probably high school students group. So what are the suggestions for the students on the extracurricular activities, especially for Chinese students?
So nothing for the extracurricular side has really changed for students or international students or students from China. The global pandemic really has not shifted some of the suggestions about extracurriculars a lot. Certainly there's going to be more students out there interested in medical fields, in scientific research, in public health, just because that's what's in the news today. And as the attention of the world is put onto these causes and these industries, you can expect that a lot of students are going to be interested in these types of things. Just as in the past, when there's been more focus on computer science, students have been interested in computer science. When there's been more focus on technology, students have gone into the engineering field. So Chinese students should still focus on their impact, and they should still focus on their involvement with what they're doing, regardless of what it is that they're doing, and really focus on that impact and involvement in organizations and clubs and causes and in their towns, more so than superlative achievement. The specifics really depend on the individual student. If you are a student that has no interest in health and medicine, then you should not be doing anything that has anything to do with the coronavirus pandemic, and let that be opportunities for students that have interest in those health and medical fields. But if you're a student who is interested in these fields, now's a great time to be able to have this kind of impact. Students really at the end of the day should be focusing on what they're passionate about, what they're motivated about, what they want to continue to study in college. Mm-hmm. Schools love it when students have been able to get involved at their high school or city, town, at the national level and been able to really make a mark, because colleges know that if you are able to make a mark in your city, at your school, then when you come to their college campus, and their college campus has many more opportunities than your high school does, then you're going to make an even bigger impact. And that's at the end of the day what colleges are looking for. They're looking for students that are going to make an impact, that are going to be able to change the world in a very significant, specific way. And they're really looking for students that have shown evidence of being able to do this in the past. The only reason that colleges look at your extracurriculars is to see how you've been able to do well in the past, what you've been able to get involved in the past, what kind of impact you've made in the past, because they know that the past performance is the best indicator of future performance. Colleges love students that are going to change the world and are going to be making a significant impact in some way. And so if you're a student that has been able to make an impact in your world in some way, then that bodes very well for you, regardless of what your world and how you define that is.
I see. Thank you so much. So I think we are done with our questions. Thank you so much for joining us and providing so many great insights.